Hi Connect2 Kids. Some of you may remember me. My name is Chris McHugh. I'm with the Hartford Area, Connecticut Bionutrient Food Association. Some of you guys came out to my garden at the George Hall Farm in Simsbury last summer for a tour. This summer, because we can't have you come out to the garden, I wanted to make a few videos for you guys to help you on your gardening adventures this summer on your own. So I have some helpers with me today. This is my dog Bailey. My granddaughter Kayla is helping me out. She's my videographer. And this is her friend Miles. Hello. So the Bionutrient Food Association, I will call the BFA for short. The BFA is all about soil quality and food quality and human health quality, because all of those things are interrelated. Our own human health comes from the health of the land that we're living on and from the food that comes from that land. The gardening that I'm going to be teaching you guys about is how to copy how things are grown in nature, because if you look at things growing out in a field or in a forest, or if you go out to a park somewhere, things grow wonderfully on their own without humans fussing over them too much. Out in the forest, nobody's irrigating it and no one's fertilizing it. There's a whole system in place that nature has provided that allows for the cycling of food and water for these plants. And so that's what we want to do as gardeners. We want to copy nature as much as possible. So I'm going to show you some different ways to grow plants. Sometimes you'll grow in the ground like in a garden as this is, but then there's also some great ways that you can grow plants in different sizes of containers. So you could grow plants on a balcony or on a patio or on your front porch. So we'll show you some different options. Okay, we're going to get started in just a minute. So the first thing that you need when you're going to start gardening is a space to put your plants and your soil into. If you don't have a yard where you can put plants and seeds right into the ground, you can use lots of different things for containers. Some of the things that I use are, these are big containers from a landscaper. So if you have any neighbors who are getting some bushes or shrubs or flowers in their yard, you might see if you can take the plastic containers that are left behind. That's what these are. These 5-gallon buckets you can get at different hardware and home goods stores, and I think restaurants often have buckets these size if they get these big containers full of pickles, or I've seen pie filling and different things like that. So you could check with a restaurant. You could also use a can like this that you might find canned vegetables or ketchup or something like that in this, and so these types of containers would work well too. You could also use those type of big plastic storage bins that sometimes people would use for storing clothes or toys or whatever. The thing to remember, you need to have drainage holes in whatever container you're using to grow your plants in. Whatever you're going to fill up with soil, it has to be able to drain some water out. So these landscaping buckets already have holes in the bottom, but a 5-gallon bucket or a storage bin or even a can, you would need to take a hammer and a nail and puncture holes in it. I've also heard of people taking a nail and heating it up. Have an adult help you. Maybe if you have an outside fire pit or if you have a grill or something, you could heat up a long metal nail, and then it would sort of melt and puncture holes in your bin. And you don't need a ton of holes. Like this is a pretty big bucket, and it has like just 5 holes. They're probably about the size of a dime. Or you could just punch a bunch of smaller holes for all the water to drain out. So then the other thing that you need is some tools to work the soil and with the plants for digging and for clearing off the surface. I like to use, this is a 3-prong rake. It's a short-handled hand tool, and that's good for just kind of stirring the soil up a little bit to keep it nice and loose, and for keeping the soil loose enough that weeds don't start to grow there. And I also like to use a small shovel. It's a hand trowel or hand shovel, and that's good for scooping, and you can dig a hole and put your little seedling in. But if you don't have those types of tools, you could probably find things in your kitchen. So we have a spatula. That's good for scraping the surface. If you have some weeds or things growing on the top of your soil that you want to get rid of, you could scrape with a spatula and that would remove that. Big spoon is good for digging and scooping. You could also even use just a regular fork And this is a thing for straining spaghetti out of a pot of boiling water, and that would also be good to use as a little rake. So you can get creative and find different types of tools to use. I'm going to show you how to make a planter pot. This is about a 5-gallon size, similar to this 5-gallon bucket. This is one that I have that was actually part of my winter garden last winter. These pots full of leafy greens grew on the side of my house facing south with no heat except for the sun. They were covered with clear plastic to keep out the snow and ice and cold. I picked fresh greens all winter. You can see that there's a little plant coming up here in the front. These two here in the front are actually Swiss chard plants that were growing last year, and we harvested all winter long. And I cut them back in the springtime so that I could plant other things in here, and they've started to regrow. And this bigger plant that I have right here is called a ground cherry. It's also called a husk cherry. It's in the tomato family, and it's a kind of a little fruit. So that's another thing I should mention, is you can plant more than one type of vegetable in a pot. If you plant something that's going to get real big, you could plant something else that's smaller in there with it, and they'll do all right together. So here I have a 5-gallon pot that has a little bit of soil in the bottom, and what you need to keep in mind is you want to start with the best quality ingredients, the cleanest ingredients that you can find. You can go to the store and you can get potting soil, but try and find something that doesn't have any chemicals in it. It doesn't have to say organic on it, but if you can find organic soil, that's a really good place to start. If you can find soil that has some food for your plants mixed into it, that's a really good thing. I'm going to be mixing up my own soil blend here, but if I was going to just buy a package of soil to start my garden pots in, I would want something that had some composted manure in it, maybe some composted leaves or leaf mulch, maybe some wood chips, some sand. Seaweed is a really good thing to have in there, and rock dust like granite meal or limestone or basalt, rock powder. Those are good things to have as food for your plants. And the manure, and like composted manure or composted leaves, those are actually adding some life to your soil because of all the little types of bacteria and little microorganisms that live in that composted material. Those will make your plants healthier also. So here I've got my bucket, and it's about 1/4 full with some soil from my garden. And then I'm going to add some sand, because that makes it nice and light and it makes the water drain well. It just keeps things kind of loose. Plants' roots don't like to be smashed in really tight packed soil. They like to have a little bit of air move so they can really move their roots around down through it. So you want to make sure that your soil isn't dirt that's packed real hard. So I've got a little sand in there, and then this is a little bit of composted chicken manure. You can see there's a couple feathers in there. So I'm going to put that down in the bottom part. Here I have some ground up basalt, rock dust. Basalt is a type of stone that we find all around here in New England. So I'm going to add some of that. And I have some ground up limestone. I'm going to add some of that. Here I have some wood chips from underneath some trees. It's small and it's little bits, and it's already starting to decompose a little bit. Here's some grass trimmings from the lawn. Some of it's dried up and some of it's still green. I'll add that. I do have some seaweed that's mixed in with some of my soil. There's a couple of seashells. We collected seaweed on the beach, and I always put that in with my plants. And the seashells are good calcium too, so that can go in. And then here I have a bucket. I've just scooped up some leaves from in the woods, or under some trees, anywhere in a park or wherever you can find them. So I'm going to add a little bit of that. Ideally, these should be ground up a little bit better, but for now, this is good enough. And this is called organic matter, and this is food for all the little critters that live in our soil, all those little tiny microbes, the different types of bacteria and the fungi and little tiny insects that live in the soil and that help to feed our plants. So then I'm going to mix this around. Give that a good stir. And that's like a whole big stew pot of yummy food for our plants to be taking up. That's going to keep the plants growing really healthy. And one thing that really needs to be added here, I guess I should be doing it this way so you can see it, is water. Plants need a lot of water. They need to drink. So I've got my watering can here. Wet that all down. And then I'm going to add some more soil on the top that I'm going to plant into. Yeah, that's good and soaked. Stir that up a little. Alright, and then now this is a bucket with some potting soil out of a bag, and that's what I'm going to plant straight into. So when my seeds first start growing, this is what they'll be sitting in, but then as the seeds open up and the roots start coming out and the roots reach down into the bottom of my pot here, they'll have all that good food down in the bottom, all those different things we just added. Oops, piece of wire, that's not helpful. Alright, so there's my potting soil. Okay, and again I'm going to give that a good water. So you want to start your seeds out in a nice damp place. Sometimes seeds can be really small, and so if you put your seeds into dry soil and then you start watering, it's like having a big rain come, and sometimes it'll kind of wash your seeds out, or it'll bury them too deeply in the soil. So it's a good idea to water first and then put your seeds in. So now here's my soil. It's all nicely wet. So I have two different things I can put in here. This is a little tiny tomato plant, a little seedling that actually I just dug up in my garden. It's called a volunteer. When the tomatoes drop on the ground in the summer and the fall, the seeds end up in the soil, and then the following year they just start growing on their own. So this, I can show you a little bit. If I let the soil fall away, you can see there's the roots. This is a real baby, a very small plant, but the neat thing about a tomato is I'm actually going to dig the hole deep enough to bury this whole part of the stem, and everywhere on this stem this plant is going to send out roots. And the more roots you have in the ground, the stronger your plant is anchored into the soil, so if you get winds or rains or storms or anything, the plant won't fall out of your pot. And also it's all of those roots are helping to feed the plant. So I'm going to dig a nice deep hole here. Put my little seedling in there. So I dug a nice deep hole that my whole hand can go into, and then I'll put my tomato in there. There. Get it snugged in really nice. And now that will grow up and get really tall and will grow tomatoes. Now a tomato is going to be a very tall, bushy plant, but it's going to take a while to grow. So I could put something else in the pot here that's a faster growing plant that will get harvested and eaten before the tomato plant takes over the whole pot. So here I have some radish seeds. Probably wouldn't do carrots. And I also have some lettuce seeds. And let me put these in my hand so you can see them. Kayla, can you come closer? I don't know if you can see. Can you see into the bag, or is there?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, so you can see the radish seeds on this hand, and these are lettuce seeds in the bag here. Those are pretty tiny seeds, but these are going to be faster growing. And so I can put a couple of these in with the tomato plant, and these will get eaten before the tomato plant gets too huge. Now for a seed, these are pretty tiny, so you don't want to dig a deep hole to put this into. For a little tiny seed like this, I would probably make a hole that's, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch deep, or 1/4 of an inch deep. It's very shallow. And just poke my little seed in there. I can put a couple of radishes in here. I'll put in, let's say 4. Do 4 radishes. And then these will grow pretty quickly, like in a month or so. There. So that's that. And then I just kind of smooth the dirt over and tamp it down a little bit, and that's that. And then I'll give it another little bit of water. I don't want to flood it too much because I don't want my seeds to wash off somewhere else into the pot. Just give them a little bit.
Hey!
There. And that's that. And then you want to make sure that you have your pot somewhere in the sunshine. Plants need the sun to grow well. So you want to put it in a good sunny area. At least 6 hours of sun a day is perfect. If they get more than that, that's fine, but just remember that the soil might dry out more often, so you'd want to water them at least once a day.